Alright, fellow doctors, in today's video we're going to analyze the current standard banner that runs until July 24th. It features rate up 5-star operators Executor, Meteorite, and Zima, as well as 6-star operators Angelina and Nightingale. So if you've watched my previous video, you'll know that I generally recommend that you pull until you get your guaranteed 5-star operator. But the question we're going to be answering here is whether or not you should continue pulling until you get a specific operator rather than just getting your first 5-star operator. So, let's just get right into it and see if this banner is something you want to, pull for. So the first unit we'll talk about is Executor. He's actually the unit that I ended up getting from my guaranteed 5-star. I believe he actually got it in like 1 or 2 pulls, which was really great since I didn't have to use a lot of Erundum. So let's talk a little bit about Executor. He's a unique sniper in that he has a lower range than other snipers, but offers considerable amount of damage in order to make up for it. So he's difficult to use before promoting him because of his uniquely short range. It covers just the 2 tiles in front of him, as well as the tile to the left and right from the tile immediately in front of him. I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but you can look down here at the bottom left of this diagram. You can see it forms this like little plus sign, so you'll place them here, and the only tiles he'll be able to attack are the tiles that he himself is standing on, as well as the 2 tiles in front of him and the ones left and right to the tile in front of him. He becomes a little bit more easy to use once you promote him, just because he then gets the tiles to the left and right of the 2 tiles in front of him. So if you look at his promotion, it ends up becoming something that looks like this. It doesn't expand at Elite 2, so this is his final range. This range is a lot more usable in my opinion. It gives you a lot more places where you can effectively put him. It's still not particularly great range, but it's a lot better in my opinion than what he starts with. So in order to make up and compensate for this range reductions, what he gets is basically damage, and he gets damage in the form of a few areas. One, he has slightly higher innate attack damage than standard snipers, so getting those extra damage points is very useful. The other is via his trait, where if he is attacking units within the road directly in front of him, so like right here, he deals bonus damage to them. The other is through his talent, Final Modification, which comes in at E1 and ignores 80 defense. And then if you take this to E2, it becomes 160 defense. And if you at any point increase his potential to 5, then it will grant an additional plus 15 defense ignore. And that makes him like one of the few snipers that can really deal damage to like high defense enemies, which tend to really be the bane of snipers. The sniper class as a whole, particularly the anti-aerial sniper archetype. These are like your Jessica is a very popular one. Your Meteor is a popular one. Exusia is another popular one. These are all sort of like low damage, fast attacking snipers, and so while they're really great at obviously clearing out low defense enemies, which aerial units do tend to be a part of, once you start getting to higher defense enemies, they tend to just like do nothing to them, since they're really just hitting them with like pellets. But Executor really doesn't care for the most part. He'll be able to just like power through even higher defense enemies, and his damage will still be noticeable, and that makes him unique, right? Like he's one of the few sniper operators that can really pull that off. And then his damage is also further amplified by the first part of his trait, which lets him attack all enemy units within range. So this is like real AoE damage. It's not something like Meteorite, who we'll be discussing next, or Gitano, for example. Those are units that deal AoE damage, but in the sense that they'll attack a single unit and then the unit that they attack will deal splash damage to any units around them. But Executor doesn't deal splash damage. He actually just attacks everything within his range. So, it doesn't matter if, there's a unit here and there's a unit here. He will hit both of them. He'll hit both of them and damage both of them equally. And it doesn't matter if it's 1, if it's 2, if it's 5. Like, he just will hit all of them at the same time. Very different from, like, a Gitano or something who, if there's a unit here, she'll hit this unit and it'll deal damage to units around them. But if there's also a unit here, they won't take damage. He just actively hits everything around him. And so in that case, in that sense, I think that obviously the more enemies that are within his range, the more damage the more his damage will spike. But I think that you shouldn't really compare him as much to Meteorite and those AoE snipers. In my opinion, I think he falls more in line, because there's really no one in his archetype, but I would say that he falls more in line with like a physical damage variant of Ifrit, because a lot of them, they do have a lot of like commonalities, both in strengths and in weaknesses. So Ifrit also has a unique range. It's not this range. Hers is like just a straight line, but but both Ifrit and Executor, compared to their standard, their standard class, they do have unique ranges, and they both have the exact same weakness of like really high DP cost. It starts off at 28, and then it goes up by 3 to like 31. And Ifrit's is also like really high DP cost as well. She does, once you promote her, hit the 30s as well. So yeah, I would say that you could kind of think of her Executor as like the sniper physical version of Ifrit. In my opinion, I wouldn't necessarily roll for Executor. I think that, there are other snipers that I think can be a little bit more usable, that can hit, that can still puncture through high defense enemies. I believe Prominence is one of them, and then Schwartz is the 6-star version. And those units can also deal, sizable damage. They obviously have their own strengths and weaknesses. His being that he can hit all enemies within range. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think that Executor is a necessity. That said, if you pulled him like I did, definitely go for it and level him up, because I do think that he does open up some interesting and unique strategies. So we're going to move on to Meteorite, which I don't have on this account, but I wanted to point out that you can get Meteorite from the Distinction Shop for 45 yellow distinctions. So if you have the distinctions and you need an AoE sniper, you can go get her. Angelina, who's also on the same banner, is also here for 180. So yeah, we're going to take a look at Meteorite. So unlike Executor, she is much less unique. She actually does have a 4-star unit, Shiryuki, within her archetype. So just a little bit about the AoE sniper archetype. First, it benefits from extended range. You can see here her max E2 range. At E1, she actually has this sort of 3x4 range. Sorry, at E0. Right from the beginning, she has this 3x4 range. At E1, she'll get this first square in front, and then at E2, she flushes out the range with a 3x5 range. And so this extended range is obviously good, just she's able to hit more targets, especially more targets outside of her range. I don't really think there's anything standard by default, really, that will be able to hit her before she can hit it, outside of like some very like specific like situations. So yeah, I mean that's obviously a good thing. Keep in mind they don't have the anti-aerial trait, so they won't automatically go attack aerial units, so they're not necessarily reliable for that purpose. They deal AoE damage, and again, that's the splash AoE damage, so they'll attack one target and then they just deal damage to the enemy units around them. And they'll tend to have higher attack damage, but slower attack speed than their anti-aerial counterparts. And of course, they also have the higher DP cost. Not as high as Executor, I believe at E0 she actually starts off at like 24 and then goes to 26, then 28. So there is that. So speaking more specifically about Meteorite, she actually builds on her archetype a little bit. Her first skill actually expands the AoE damage, so like a greater range for the splash damage in addition to just like dealing a chunk of damage. And this is actually a really good skill because it's readily available, right? So like she'll pull this off. She'll charge this skill after 4 attacks, and if you max this out, so you get this to mastery 3, I believe it goes down to charging it after 3 attacks. So that's potentially quite a lot of AoE damage, like really heavy AoE damage. She'll be doing AoE damage with every skill, with every hit, but every time she'll proc this, that's potential for a considerable amount of AoE damage. The other thing too is she has this crit chance sort of talent, this blast attachment refit. It starts off at 15%, at E2 goes up to 30%, and has the chance to increase her attack by 60%. And yeah, that's both on talent, like regular attacks and skills. So, if the stars line up for you, right, like, and you get this proc on like the same attack that she's using, like this skill, you have potential for like just a stupid amount of damage. And yeah, like that's good, right? Like, who doesn't love large amounts of damage? So she's going to be particularly good for clearing out just like waves of enemies, particularly like mid to low defense enemies. She can like really clear out really quickly, just with her first skill and her talent proccing. Her second skill provides a bit of utility. It provides a 210 defense decrease for 10 seconds, and that's just going to let her deal with certain like higher defense enemies. Not as good for this purpose as I would say as Executor is, just because this does take a considerable amount of time to charge up, and unlike Executor, where he just has 160 defense ignore like within his talent, and that's just something that a Meteorite won't have, right? Like, she won't have consistent defense ignoring. She'll only have it for a few seconds, and even then it'll take some time for quite a bit of time for her to charge up. So, in my opinion, Buckshot definitely the skill that you should probably focus on more. And yeah, in like I said, low to mid defense enemies, I think she'll do pretty well against it. She'll serve your team really well. My final thoughts on Meteorite is that she's a solid operator, but not really necessary in my opinion. I think there are other sources of AoE damage that you can deal with. I find that you have AoE damaging guards that can dish out physical damage. You have units like Silver Ash that can deal quite a lot of physical AoE damage. And if you don't care about the damage type, then you also have AoE casters that can also provide AoE damage, albeit magic damage. And so as a result, unlike say anti-aerial snipers, where you will always encounter maps that have aerial units, right? Like those are considerably popular. You won't ever really, you'll very rarely need to have Meteorite on your team compared to say like an anti-aerial sniper, right? Like, those are going to generally be a lot more necessary than Meteorite is. Like, if you get her, definitely a solid unit to have, but I don't find her archetype, and I don't find her in particular necessary, in part because Shiroyuki kind of is able to do a lot of what she does. Yes, Meteorite is a bit better, but she's not like head and shoulders better. So just discussing Shiroyuki like a little bit, you can see here this is just a regular level 1 Shiroyuki. So she has that standard 3x4 range. She gets the same range, right? So like, she'll get that first square at E1, and then at E2 she'll get these ranges to the side first. So she'll get the exact same range as Meteorite. Her first skill actually lets her get additional range compared to Meteorite, but her second skill changes her damage to arts in addition to granting you movement speed debuff. So the conversion of damage to physical to arts means that Shiryuki can also deal with like higher defense enemies. And it sort of compensates for the fact that her second skill doesn't have the defense down that Meteorite has. So all in all, I consider her and Meteorite to not be necessary, and I don't really consider Meteorite to be like significantly better than Shiryuki. An upgrade, sure, but like not a massive one. Not one that I would like, considerably spend a bunch of Erundum in order to get. And Zima, I can't show you, but I do have Zima on my main account. I have her actually at Elite 2. She's a solid unit, is what I'm going to say in the beginning. She falls into like the defense supportive Vanguard role, and she really shines in a team with multiple Vanguards. So her main benefits come at Elite 1 and Elite 2. So at Elite 1, she gets her second skill, which buffs the defense and attack of all Vanguards. This is a percentage-based skill. It also generates DP, which is really good. In addition to that, the skill generates an additional, makes it so that whenever a Vanguard kills a unit, it generates an additional 1 DP. So this is all really good. Lets her further enhance Vanguards in terms of making them tankier, making them deal more damage, and then just also making them generate more DP. So making them basically just do everything better across the board, which is great. And then at E2, her talent improves. So her talent at E1 decreases her own DP cost by 1. At E2, that changes to decrease the cost of all Vanguards by 1. And that's just great. That lets you get out your Vanguards, that much sooner out onto the map. On her own, she isn't a bad unit by any means. She's definitely serviceable. Her main benefits that she gives on her own will be that with her second skill and her naturally decent defense, she has pretty solid defense on her own for a Vanguard. But once you proc her skill, she actually gets a pretty sizable defense buff, and that lets her sort of be like a pseudo tank early on. She can block 2 units, and she can take a decent amount of punishment while the skill is active. The skill doesn't last for very long; it's like 10 seconds, but it does give you that sort of emergency tank if you need one. And yeah, that's definitely nice. My thoughts on Zima are that she's kind of a bit iffy, and that's because on her own she's solid, but in order for her to really shine, you need to have more Vanguards. The problem being is that once you start getting more and more Vanguards, the need to field Zima just becomes less and less, right? So if you have, fellow 5-star Vanguard Texas, right? Now you have an offensive Vanguard on the field that will also be there to generate DP via her skills, usually skill 2. If you have Siege, you have basically the strongest standard Vanguard, capable of dealing good damage, capable of blocking 2 units, has some of the best stats for her class, and generates DP perfectly fine as well with her second skill. So, once you have these Vanguards on your team, which Zima really wants because she wants to be able to support them by decreasing their DP and by giving them buffs through her second skill, you stop kind of needing Zima. So as a result, Zima kind of really only shines in certain high Vanguard strats, which aren't really ever necessary, or at least they aren't necessary very often. There was one case in a contingency contract recently where I did have both Zima, Texas, and Siege all in a squad, just because I needed a powerful Vanguard right out on the field. I wanted to get Siege right out on the field, and so I wanted the DP cost down from Zima and the DP start from Texas in order to quickly get Siege out. But outside of strats like that, and then just strats where you flood the map with Vanguard, Zima's utility kind of starts to fall. And so as a result, if you get her, definitely consider leveling her up. but I wouldn't say she's like anything super necessary. Yeah, so with that, we're going to move to the 6 stars. I guess we'll talk about Nightingale here. I actually tried rolling for Blaze. It's kind of funny. I rolled for Blaze a bit just now, and ended up getting spooked by Nightingale. So yeah, this is what a fresh Nightingale. Sorry, whoops. That is not what I wanted to do. Cool. So this is what a fresh Nightingale looks like. Yeah, so Nightingale is an interesting unit. She's a very specialized AoE healer that specializes in arts damage reduction. And we're just going to take a look real quick at her E2 here. So those are her E2 stats. So passively, she'll grant anyone within her healing range, which is standard AoE healer, 5 to 17 res depending on level and potential, right? So you saw before I showed you her at level 1. It comes from her talent, White Friend's Protection. So at level 1, it starts off with a res of +5, goes up to 10 at E1, 15 at E2, and then if you increase her potential, it'll grant an additional 2, and that's where the 17 is coming from, or up to 17 is coming from. And this is pretty sizable. So remember that unlike defense, res does not come in high numbers, right? Like a single point of res will take you a lot further than a single point of defense. Res will give you percentage-based reduction to arts damage, and so even though the numbers don't seem really, really high, plus 15 res is a lot. Like it's really high, especially to units that have like some innate res, like Nightingale here has 5, right? Like if you get her to E2, she just starts off with 20, and that's a lot of res that you get. If you have certain other defenders, like I think healing defenders get some innate res as well. You can definitely get like high res on a unit and make them pretty much impervious to magic damage, and that's really what Nightingale here is all about. So her first skill is kind of meh. You won't really be using it. The 2 skills you'll be using primarily will be Arts Shield and Sanctuary. Arts Shield sort of the more consistent one, Sanctuary sort of the more big impact one. So yeah, let's just go over them. So her second skill will give up to 3 allies a magic absorbing shield based on a percentage of her attack. You can see here at level 7 it is 60%. The range is 40 to 90% depending on level and mastery. So at level 1 it'll be 40%, and at level 7 mastery 3 it'll be 90%. It also increases the res between 5 and 20, so 5 at level 1, 20 at rank 7 mastery 3. At rank 7 flat, you can see it's plus 15. It works on a charge based system, so that's good because even if there's a lull on the map, she can stock up usages of this skill, which is just really great. So with her at say like Elite 2 level 1 and with max trust, we're looking at about plus 30 resistance that's coming from Nightingale, right? Because you were getting the 15 from here, the 15 from her talent, and that's obviously like a lot of damage mitigation, along with about a 210 damage absorbing shield, and this is gonna happen like every 10 seconds, and that's like really good. Provided the one downside to this skill is that she needs to heal the unit in order for them to get the shield, so they'll need to have taken some chip damage or any kind of damage really before she can heal and give them the shield. But once you've got that shield on you and once you've got these effects placed on you, yeah, I mean, like, you're going to be blocking a lot of magic damage just via the resistance, and then on top of that you're going to have a pretty like decent sizable shield, which is just going to help further mitigate the amount of magic damage that you're taking. that can be like really, really powerful and really incredible, especially as if you have lulls in the battlefield and she's able to get this, she's able to charge these up and, you know, proc the skill multiple times on the same targets. Yeah, all fairly good. Her third skill is going to be sort of like the opposite of her second skill. You won't really be using it that often. In fact, you'll pretty much only be able to get it off once on most maps. But it gives some like really, really large bonuses. Her range expands. This is a massive range expansion. It's a really large range expansion. She gets a bonus to her attack. She grants all allies a percentage-based resin increase, and then grants them a percentage-based chance to just dodge all arts damage. So the skill is really useful. It also lasts really long at 60 seconds. This duration is set in stone, so it starts at 60 seconds, and no matter what rank and mastery you have it at, it will be 60 seconds. So for 60 seconds, you're pretty much impervious to magic damage. This skill is the ultimate like get out of arts damage skill in the game currently right now anyway. So there's a few things. The improved range is really, really important because the larger her range, the more operators that get to take advantage of the 15 res from her talent. So remember, res of all allies within range plus 15, not just 3. Like if you have 5 allies within her range, then, you know, 5 allies are getting plus 15 res. And with her third skill and the massive increase in range that she's getting, like that many more allies are getting access to the flat res of the flat plus 15 res. At E2 level 1, the skill is going to grant all operators within range about 30 or so res, right? A little bit over 30 res, because you're getting the 15 from the talent, and then you're getting an additional 105 of them. So you're doubling you're a little bit more than doubling it. You're getting about like close to 31 res from the two abilities stacked together. Again, this is just assuming that the operator has 0 innate base res, which most melee operators tend to have 0 base res. But if they do have innate res, something like Neural or something like Nightingale herself, who has plus 5 res, then obviously the percentage will just, you know, further increase their res. And it also is going to give them a 1 in 5 chance to just dodge all arts damage. You can see here that's from the 20%. If you max this out, get it to mastery 3, it becomes a 1 in 4 chance, so a 25% arts dodge chance. And again, just like really powerful, 1 in 4 chance or 1 in 5 chance, depending on if you have it at rank 7 or mastery 3 or not, to dodge all damage is just really good. If you do take damage, it's going to be severely reduced damage thanks to all of the res you're getting, and even then it's damage that isn't going to really stick because the increased attack is going to increase the power of her heals. So all in all, this skill is ridiculous in terms of how much like magic damage you'll be able to just mitigate. Whenever I've used Nightingale on my main account, who I do have at E2 level 40, it's just sort of laughable how arts damage just basically is non-existent from the enemy. Like you basically just get to ignore arts damage for the 60 seconds that the skill duration is active. That said, there are some downsides you need to know about the third skill compared to the second skill. So the first is that the cost of the third skill is 120 SP, and that is also flat, just like the 60-second range. Never changes. It's 120 from level 1, and it's 120 at rank 7 mastery 3. What does change with level up are the initial XP. SP, sorry, not XP. It starts at 100 at rank 1, and then goes up to 115 at mastery 3, which means that, you know, the initial cost is actually fairly doable. Even at level 7 right here, it's just, you know, 10 more SP in order to proc the skill. So the first cast is like pretty doable. The duration at 60 seconds is also really good. That's a really long duration skill. The problem is that in most maps, you're not feasibly going to be able to charge this up again. And even if you were to go into a long map where you could charge this up again, the charge time versus the duration time is kind of iffy, about like 50%. So it's not really something that you're going to it's not a skill that you should expect to be using more than once. And in fact, even if you do end up in a long map where you could feasibly charge this up a second time, it would actually be quicker to, after the skill ends, just retreat her, wait out the time it takes for the retreat cost to go down to 0, redeploy her, wait out the initial SP cost again, and then proc the skill again, as opposed to then, starting at 0 and waiting the 120 to charge up the SP. But yeah, all in all, that's really it about her third skill. Really powerful and really amazing skill, especially in terms of just like how immune it makes your operators to magic damage. There's also one thing we didn't discuss, which is her E2 talent, this Fleeting Phantom. This is actually something that's pretty unique. It lets her place a phantom on any melee tiles, right? They cannot be on ranged tiles. And she can pull this off up to twice per map, or twice per deploy technically, because she'll get 2 phantoms. And these phantoms are unique in that they have a ton of res, right? Like 75 res is stupidly high. So they basically ignore 75% of arts damage that they would normally receive. They have 30% dodge, and they have an increased chance of enemies attacking them. So this can really buy you some breathing room, especially, if you're finding a large wave of enemies approaching you. You can just sort of drop this in the middle of them, and they'll all just start attacking the phantom and leave your units free for some time so that they can be healed up, or mow down some of the units. And so this is actually phantoms are unique, but they're also really cool. They're really usable. The other thing that's important to note about phantoms is that it says here they don't block enemies, but they will block certain projectiles. So sniper bolts that you see in the third Annihilation map, as well as in certain maps with chapter 5 with Faust, those bolts will actually get blocked by phantoms, which is kind of useful. And if if you just need a quick block, so that's pretty much it about Nightingale. So yeah, my thoughts on Nightingale is really specialized unit, really good unit for her specialization, but obviously her specialization is going to also be kind of her downfall. You can see that she doesn't really get anything besides just a bunch of magic damage reduction. She doesn't really have anything over, say, other AoE healers in areas that don't deal without magic damage, and therefore, because of her hyper specialization, while a very good unit with what she specializes in, outside of that specialization, she kind of loses almost all of her value. Because without arts damage, really all she can provide is the innate healing, the improved, if you end up using her third skill, the improved heal means that she can heal a bit further, and the phantoms to sort of divert damage. But aside from that, she won't really be able to provide anything if there's no arts damage. In my opinion, great unit, particularly for her specialization. Specialized units like her tend to become more and more valuable later on in the game, where you will encounter certain challenges that will just change the way you need to play. So certain challenges that might hit you hard with a bunch of arts damage is where a unit like Nightingale is obviously going to specialize in. if you do just happen to get her, even if you do get her like and you're like new to the game, definitely worth it for the long run, but she won't really provide much value at the very beginning. So let's talk about Angelina. She is the other unit that is available in the Distinction Shop, and in my opinion, probably the best unit on this banner. So if you want to like roll hard, this would be the unit that you'd probably go for. So Angelina is a unique support in that she provides quite a lot of team utility, and so her main niche is that her skills all charge rather quickly and have like pretty good uptime on it, but they all have like some kind of like downside that's generally really easily worked around. So let's talk about the first skill. It's her most basic skill, not one that I think people will often stay using, but it's a pretty good like first skill. It just gives her an attack bonus, a percentage attack bonus. Gets pretty high, as you can see here at level 7 is plus 80. The downside is that it automatically activates, meaning you can't just hold on to the skill for whenever you need it. But like that's a pretty like easy to work around weakness, especially since it charges really quickly. So just 10 attacks for this to charge, and then on top of that it lasts for 30 seconds. So it's got really good uptime after it does proc. But I mean, yeah, for what it's worth, it's not something that you can really sort of manage on your own. So I guess that is her weakness. It's also just sort of like an okay skill. It's not really something that's like particularly amazing. But let's get to her second skill and her third skill, because those are where things start to get interesting. So the second skill is kind of, in my opinion, probably the hardest skill for her to use. But it's kind of funny when you do get it to use correctly, because you can basically like slow an enemy down to a halt. So once active, her attacks start to do significantly less damage. So you can see here at rank 70, it's 40%. So her attacks will just do 40% of her attack, but her attack speed increases significantly. So you can see her attack interval reduces dramatically. So she just starts attacking really, really quickly. All in all, she starts attacking to about over 3 attacks per second. And keep in mind that she falls into the the slow support archetype, meaning that all of her attacks will slow a target for a bit. And so with this skill, if you manage to like trigger it on a single enemy, it is like just sort of hilarious how slow they start like crawling towards you. Yeah, so you can actually like just really slow down an enemy. You can see here that at 20 SP cost, it's at rank 7. It's like very, very doable. Solid uptime at 26 seconds at rank 7. So all in all, good skill. I would say that the big disadvantage of this skill is that it forces you to be careful with her positioning, because if there are multiple units within her range and you trigger this skill, she'll start attacking the one that is getting closest to your base, and if the enemy, like another enemy, gets closer to your base, she'll switch targets, so she won't be able to permanently slow the single target, which is why you would probably use this skill. So that's just something to keep in mind. So the third skill. This is, I think, the skill that most people use. At least this is the skill that I use on the main account. And I think it strikes a nice balance between, easy to use and good uptime. So it doesn't have as good of an uptime as her second skill, but it's considerably easier to use. So it takes only a little bit more time to charge up. You can see here 5 more SP is going to just basically be 5 seconds. Both skills are manual. Uptime's a little bit worse at about 8 seconds, but all in all, that's not terrible. And not to mention, this would be the skill that you'd probably invest your mastery points into, so those will increase the uptime quite a bit, which is great. I mean, we could just sort of like see here, you get all enemies weight is reduced by 1 level. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Range expansion is good. This again just grants her really, really large range, and that's always good. And then you get a sizable attack buff, stronger than even her first skill, and the most important part, or one of the most important parts, is she can attack 5 enemies at the same time. So this combined with her range expansion is really powerful. It means that she's going to trigger, she won't be able to perma-slow an enemy, but it does mean that she can slow down 5 enemies, and she'll be able to deal quite a considerable amount of damage to them. And I think this combination is like really powerful and makes up for the fact that you aren't going to be able to perma-slow an enemy. The unique thing about the weight reduction, she can't really take advantage of this by herself, but other units that can push and pull, so specialists like Cliffhard and F-Eater and Shaw and Rope, and also the guard Croissant, I believe, also has on her second skill a push, can all take advantage of this. This weight reduction just effectively means that they can displace enemies more easily and and much further than they would normally otherwise be able to. So that wraps up her skills, but even outside of her skills, she does have a few things going for her, namely in her talents. So the first talent increases the attack speed of all units. It starts off at, I believe, +3, goes up to 5, then 7. This isn't like anything super game breaking, but it is a nice sizable attack speed increase. Nice passive. It is global, so you don't have to worry too much about getting your units within her range. It's for the entire map. Her second talent, part-time job, which restores the HP of all allies by 20 seconds whenever she doesn't have a skill, is like, it doesn't seem like a lot, but there are a few special things to note. So the main thing is that certain units like Helliger, which we actually do have on this account, so I can show you. So Helliger and some units like him have a certain restriction on them in that they can't be healed by other units. And so this means that, like, you know, units like a normal heal from Perfumer, or like from Hibiscus, or even Nightingale won't trigger on Helliger, right? Like, he can't be healed by them. But global passives like part-time job actually do ignore that penalty and allow him to be healed, so he'll actually get this 20 HP per second, and so that's something that you should consider. Units like Perfumer also have that too. If you take her to E1 and then E2, so this restore HP of all allies by 3%. Yeah, those are global, and those actually will bypass restrictions like can't be healed by other units from units like Helliger. And then there's also a defender, I believe Vulcan, that also has that same restriction. But yeah, that's something to consider, because yeah, it gives the skill a bit more power than it normally would be. So her main disadvantages are pretty like easy to do, to work around. Mainly it's just that her second and third skill, she can't attack when the skills aren't active. So when these skills aren't procced, all she's really providing is just her talents, but that's like not terrible because her talents are pretty solid, and the uptime on these skills and the cooldown on them is actually like fairly good, right? Like, you get a fairly long amount of time that these skills last, and the cooldown's definitely very workable. So all in all, definitely a great unit. I would definitely stick to the third skill. It even becomes better if you manage to get some SP batteries within your team. You further decrease the cooldown on her skills. She can pretty much, you know, she can pretty much have really good uptime on this skill. So that's going to pretty much conclude my thoughts on Angelina. In terms of this actual banner, I think obviously yes, do your 10 until you get your 5-star units. In terms of whether or not you should pull, I would say Angelina is the best unit in this pool. Really great unit. Nightingale is also pretty useful if you're getting to the point where you have like enough good operators and you're ready to start getting operators for specialized purposes. Then I think Nightingale is definitely worth a pull. Meteorite I think is solid, but not necessary. I think Executor is a bit more niche, but also a solid choice to level up. If you do pull him, I definitely will on this account. And Zima's not a bad unit by any means. I think the one issue with this banner is that it is running alongside the Blaze banner, and so for the most part, I would say save your rolls for the Blaze banner. But if you do have like if your team is like has like a really like large weakness in it, in that like, you know, you have no AoE healer or you have no like good slow supporter, then this banner definitely has some things going for you. So yeah, that's going to be basically it for this video, and we'll continue doing display up analysis videos as they come out. But yeah, until the next time, everyone.